I'll call the meeting to order for our October 22nd Haddonfield School District Board of Education work session. Mike, can you take roll?
Mr. Bedford.
Here.
Ms. Crooked.
Here.
Ms. Hoag.
Here.
Ms. Hogarth.
Here.
Ms. Kuttner.
Here.
Ms. Paoli.
Here.
Mr. Vecchio.
Here.
Vice President Seidel.
Here.
President Sangillo.
Here. Let's rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mike, would you read us the statement concerning open public meetings?
Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Superintendent of Schools in the following manner. On January 10th, 2020, notice of this meeting was posted on the interior of the school administration offices, 1 Lincoln Ave, Haddonfield. Written notice was submitted and filed with the Haddonfield Borough Clerk, and notices were faxed to the Courier Post and mailed to the Retrospect newspaper.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we have presentations this evening to start off with. I think, Chuck, you're starting off with board.
I am, yes.
Goals? Okay, great. Let's
Share my screen here. So, for those of us, for the board knows this, but for those of us who watch who don't know, every July there's usually an extended work session, which the board develops goals and puts in plans for the year. As you would imagine, this year was a little different, and that time to set goals was supplanted by dealing with opening schools. One of the things we said over and over again is we can't let keeping our heads above water with COVID supersede our mission, which is to improve our school systems, move forward in those ways. So as an overview, tonight we're reading the policy, the first reading of 2132. This is a district's goals and objectives. And so we have goals we're developed based on our strategic plans. And what we're going to look at now is ways over the next several months, we're going to have the Board of Ed actively involved in participating in these goals. That's going to be some homework for everyone. It's also going to be some mini workshops. In a way, this will be, I guess, an experiment. In the past, we've had our goals and we've given you updates every 4 or 5 months. And so while you were actively involved in helping to generate the goals and monitoring them, in a lot of ways, you weren't participating in the goals so much, right? This is going to give the board the opportunity to actually experience some of the work we're doing with staff and with students so you can see how these goals work and what it feels like to be part of it. So looking at our first goal, and what I have Gino, Carmen, and Colleen are all here, and they help develop these, so they might want to add something. If you have any questions, I'll be able to field any questions once I'm done. For social emotional learning, as you know, we've had ruler training. You've heard a lot about that. You've gotten links, I believe. If you haven't gotten them, you should certainly reach out to Gino to do two ruler training courses. One is the introduction to emotions and emotional intelligence, and the second is the tools for emotional intelligence. So you'll have the opportunity to go through those trainings, which all of our staff members have done, and try to understand what this ruler is all about, rather than just hear about it. So I can speak from experience. You know, Gino spoke to me a lot about it. But once you get involved in this and start using the tools implemented, it really does change and make you see the different value in it. I know that I have my mood meter on my phone, and I go to this a lot when I'm having moments in my day, and I track myself, and it really is a useful tool. And you'll see, if you're having in a bad moment, it'll say, "Do you want to change your moment?" And you say yes. It'll say, "Smile for a minute," and you feel better. It's one of those things. But it's not just about feeling better; it's about being able to identify those. It's all about identifying and regulating your emotions. And so this training, you'll experience what they did. And then probably in November, I'll talk to Jim at the time. The mini workshops for SEL is each school, and I sent you the link, developed a charter, which is agreed upon norms about how to communicate and have healthy relationships. And so with Gino, you're going to be dealing with Kristen, right?
Yeah, Dr. Loren and I.
Dr. Loren and Gino are going to take us through, and as a board, develop a board charter, much like each of our buildings did. But they're going to be a really useful exercise in seeing how the goals are implemented and how that works for SEL. Gino, anything to add to that? Or
No, you got it.
for contemporary learning, Colleen's going to get us some articles to look at, and the NJ, the school board's presentation, Rutgers, who we're working with, everything you need to know before making an investment in makerspace. That went off, I think it was Wednesday, but for those of you who didn't go to any of the board sessions, they're online recorded for a year. So we have access to these for the year, so we can go back and sit and review this presentation by Rutgers, who has already trained or worked with our administrator, and we'll be working with our teachers as well about what project-based learning is and how it should look different in the classroom. She'll get an experience in that, and then we will actually have a session coming up where we'll be given a challenge. The board will take time during one of our work sessions, and we'll develop a project-based lesson. So maybe we'll have Rutgers come in and work with us, and they'll take us through what this experience would feel like in a classroom and how it changes learning. So we know, we feel what this is like. Any questions or any comment anything to add to that, or any questions?
No, that was wonderful.
Linda?
Yeah, I actually attended that
Oh, did
session
you?
about
Yes.
the makerspace, and I mean, I couldn't be more behind that. And I love the idea of us being hands-on rather than just sitting here and listening, to actually be immersed in it and really feel the things that we're trying to move towards. I think it's a great idea.
You know, we're in the education business. Someone's volunteering over this, that's our jobs. But the thing about it, you hear all the time what education is, and telling people things is not education, right? It's experiencing and learning from them. And so this is a nice opportunity for us, as you said, to get that side of it, right? So I think this is an exciting thing. Gratuitous outcome of this. And then finally, cultural responsiveness. So we already have Jamie and Lynn volunteer to be on the Equity Council. So we have some representatives going to sit on the Equity Council. We're meeting, our administrative team is meeting with Dr. Zion to go over the IDI, the survey we took last year. And we're also going to share those results with the board, because you guys also participated in that. And then the mini workshop here is still up in the air, because the key pin, one of those words, linchpin to our cultural responsiveness is this Equity Council. That's really going to work to put things in place, professional development, learning opportunities, resources for people. So as the Equity Council starts to meet monthly, this will be the third workshop we have, because the Equity Council is going to help develop what board activity will be put in place. So I'm leaving that open and vague, because that doesn't really exist in our minds quite yet. Any questions or thoughts? Or Carmen, if you have anything to add to that, I mean.
Yes. We have our calendar of dates that the Equity Council will meet. So our first Equity Council meeting is scheduled for November 10th. We have one meeting scheduled per month. Each meeting is 2 hours long. Shelley Zion will help us facilitate those meetings, all the meetings. And additionally, we have established our entire Equity Council. So I'm really excited about the work that we'll be able to do.
Thanks, Shelley. And the other thing I put for homework too, I did with the next Monday is our second town hall meeting, where we look at how to be an anti-racist. And the format is going to be taking a lot of the stuff, a lot of the questions and concerns from the first town council and address those with the panel. So the first part will be addressing those. I think there's 9 panelists. Carmen, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, 9 panels, about 5 minutes each, addressing certain areas. And then it'll be a half an hour, 35 minutes of Q&A. That'll be Monday at 7 o'clock. I know it's kind of a short notice, but we were looking for a date to fit in. And if we don't go next Monday, then we're in November, which is the full week all first. Then that second week becomes tough. And if you're not there, you could easily slide to December. And we made a decision that was more important, even with a short notice, to have it rather than keep pushing it off. Because I think we need the conversations need to continue. And the longer we delay that second meeting, I think the more we lose momentum on that. So that's the rationale for that.
Is the meeting going to be available on our YouTube channel?
Yes, it's going to be very similar to the last one. It'll be a Zoom meeting with YouTube channel set up.
How will that information get out?
It was emailed out today. I think it's been put on Facebook, and we'll post it on the website. And we also, if you remember, before the last one, we had roughly 200, just shy of 200 individuals email. We've also personally emailed all of those people who wrote it earlier with all the information too, so they have it as well.
It may not be appropriate, I'm not sure, for this meeting, but for this meeting, as well as COVID announcements, how do we involve the public that don't have children in school? Is that appropriate for the town hall, or do you only want?
It is appropriate for the town hall, and I will have to look into how to do that. I don't have an answer for that right now, Heather.
We've been encouraging people to join the list. If you're not on, you have to opt in to get the newsletter and the emails. And there was a circulation that went around encouraging people. And I remember because I shared it on a couple community sites. So your hope is like, I think that, encouraging people, even if you write on your own page to encourage people to opt in.
But if we put it on our website or in any newsletters that might get published in news publications, that might be a good way to reach.
Right. And I'll also reach out to the borough, because I'm sure they have a way they communicate with all residents. And maybe we can cooperate with them and use that tool. It's a good idea. Thank you. Any other questions or anything about this? Thank you.
Rachel, thanks. Okay, we'll do committee reports. Give you want to report on curriculum?
No, I sent out the minutes today. I'll save that for the public meeting, the update. And other than to say, reiterate what Chuck said about Ruler. If you haven't activated your account, activate your account, and the two sessions, go through those. So our homework. I don't want the TBD to actually have a date. I wish we'd all get it done soon so that we can move to the next phase.
Can I ask a question on that? Because I got the email and signed up, but I didn't get a separate email saying these are the ones.
It's in your dashboard.
Yeah.
So we can circulate screenshots.
You go under courses, so there's a little menu up top, you go under courses, once you hit that, you'll see the two courses that Chuck just.
Oh, okay. I thought we were getting separate emails, so that's, all right, so
No.
go under courses and they'll be in there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And not necessarily a committee report for curriculum, but just a reminder to do your board training. Figure this is as good as any. I only think of it because they finally graded my board training all the way back from the beginning of February. I finally got the grades today. So if you haven't done your required trainings, might as well get them done so we don't get yelled at.
All right, Susan, do you want to do finance? Susan? I saw you on mute, but we haven't heard you yet. Is your phone muted? We still don't hear you, Susan. All right, I'm going to skip Susan for a second. We'll go to,
Oh, I'm sorry, Adam. I wasn't at the finance meeting.
that's right. All right, let's go to Lynn and I'll pull the finance notes.
So we met, policy committee met on October 8th and went through 30 policies, so we had a pretty thick agenda. As part of our monthly review of existing policies, we looked at 10 of them and pulled just one, which will be updating our organizational chart, which we'll bring back to you for our first reading. We did table for the foreseeable future, 0155.1, which is referencing board member participation in a board meeting remotely. There were just too many issues that we couldn't resolve, and we thought the pandemic was complicating it, and we'll just table it until meetings become a little bit more normal, and we need this policy. So that's on hold for a while. And then there are 17 policies and regulations up for first reading this month. Two of them we pulled last month during our monthly review. One was the mission statement and then school district goals that Chuck just talked about. And then we have 10 mandated updates from Strauss-Esme, 4 mandated new policies from Strauss-Esme, and 1 recommended update. So all of those were discussed in the minutes that I sent around. And just for anyone watching at home, just a reminder that if you are interested in looking at these policies, they're all at the bottom of the Board of Ed page as draft policy, so you can look at those. So unless anyone has questions, I'm not going to go through them.
Thanks, Lynn. Jamie, anything with communications?
No?
Okay. Tom, do you have any updates for?
Just to update everybody, we're still proceeding towards the final execution, ratification, and vote. We are in the process of reviewing salary guides with the association, and that'll be the last stage before the association will ratify and we will vote.
All right. I'm gonna do finance and facility, but I need to pull up the agenda. And I'm gonna try to read it.
Got it?
I do, it's just slow because I'm running so many things on this sheet. We discussed, we heard from the Haddonfield Sculpture Trust, host, Haddonfield Outdoor Sculpture Trust. Stuart Harding brought his board members, many of his board members. Stuart has put together a board that is the list of who's who of Haddonfield, people who have done work to support the town over the last 3 decades. It is the list to go to if you need something done. Stuart is tenaciously working towards getting use of the carriage house, which is on the Hopkins property that we're swapping the borough for. We're swapping Radnor for the Hopkins property. On that property is the carriage house. We told their board and Stuart that we don't own it yet, so we can't make any decisions. We also, we have to, once the swap goes through, assuming it does, which I'll throw in as a part of this conversation, we're going to review the swap next week, really. I think we have to carve out some time to talk about how we got here and why we're doing it. Because we have 3 new board members who were not a part of the original conversations. So we have to, Mike gave me a file of all the documents that we submitted to the DOE, all the appraisals that were submitted, and I'll make that available to the board without overwhelming you, but I'll try to pare it down. I didn't do it in time for the work session. Just so we can discuss it and determine whether or not it's something we still want to go forward with 3 new board members. We don't want to make any assumptions, and 3 people have to be a part of that conversation that weren't before.
Because that's contract, is that actually, were you doing that in public session or in executive session?
I think we probably have the ability to do it in exec if we want to. I don't know if we need to. I think it's we have not had any meetings about the swap in exec thus far.
Right.
So why start now?
Okay.
But it's allowable. Back to Stuart Harding. Once we, and the host at the Outdoor Sculpture Trust, once we effect the swap, if we effect the swap, then we have to look at all available options for this property. From what I understand, Stuart was very deep in a negotiation with the borough to use the property for his organization. So, there's a lot of momentum there just to finish the deal the way it was written. What we told Stuart and his board was that when you use a school property, it's a whole nother set of rules. So now once the property is owned by a school district, now we have to relook at every option through the lens of what's allowable on school property by the Department of Education. So that's where we are with the swap, and that's where we are with host requesting use of the carriage house. We got an update. Lynn and I were actually in along with a bunch of Chief of Police, Sandy Horowitz, and some community members got to view, I think it was 4 or 5 security systems companies came in and presented proposals to put a lockdown system in, that we're funding that lockdown system with the grant that Sandy Horowitz was able to get for us. So that they're selecting a company to put that system in. Mike laid out an RFP and an RFQ schedule, not just for this year, so we should regularly go out. We talked about this with Haddonfield Childcare last year, just about that we hadn't had a schedule for regularly going out for proposals. Mike put together a nice schedule for us to not only follow this year, but to follow into the next 6 or 7 years. The Sea Wing courtyard beautification, we approved, we are recommending that the board approve a change order to add some fencing for security measures. We're gonna have some outdoor classrooms tucked in the center of the school, in the Sea Wing courtyard. We wanna put fencing there so it's not accessible by the public, so that people still would have to go through regular entrances to the school. Indoor facility usage, we had a conversation about, due to COVID, our indoor spaces, obviously we're not allowed to use them as we have, and we've also altered the way our indoor spaces are being used for storage and classrooms, and how that's going to affect winter community sports and community organizations that use our storage. So we just made sure we were clear about where we went at with Mike. We're getting some new residency checking software so that Mike doesn't have to manually go and do the residency checks that he had to do previously. It should save us, it's an investment, but it should save us money in the long run because we won't have to spend as much money doing the discovery for where the people are still living in district when they're attending our schools. And we had a brief conversation about the LRFP, long-range facilities plan, which we need to update. It's time to do that, and Susan is working on it with the business office. So long. Okay, but that's what happened. Did I miss anything? Any
Is that
questions?
software the stuff that's on the agenda for the night, for like 2480?
Yeah, to approve next meeting, yes. Anything else? Wasn't the wait worth it? Okay, now we're gonna have a report from Gino on the return to school surveys. Gino's our survey man now. Let's hear it. I'm sorry, I said Chuck. I was looking at Gino and said Chuck. This is Gino, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna do,
Did I say Chuck?
this part.
Oh, I said
said
Gino.
Gino.
Chuck is right at the beginning. I
Okay.
moved it to the beginning. It should be there. One slide before that. There you go.
All right.
You can go to the next one. All right, great. Yeah, so we recently launched 3 surveys, and they're entitled Back to School surveys, and they touch on really a variety of areas that have to do with not only parents, students, staff feedback about how the return to school has gone, but also addresses a lot of areas of social emotional learning associated with opening school in the midst of a global pandemic. And so just have an overview. Some of you in this room may have completed the survey. There are a variety of topic areas in the surveys that we distributed. And again, we distributed surveys to all of our parents, students in grades 3 through 12, and all of the faculty and staff. And it's kind of funny, when we distributed the parent survey, Chuck and I were watching in real time the completion rate. And within 30 minutes of distributing that survey, we had over 400 responses.
You couldn't get on.
So
I mean,
that was impactful. So, but the broad areas that connect the 3 different surveys that we distributed include the learning model, so feedback on the current learning model and how that's going, school public health measures, which ask questions about how are we doing with our COVID measures and the precautions that we're taking, how well are we communicating those plans, academic needs, student engagement, student relationships, cultural awareness and action. That one was just for students in grades 6 through 12. And we added a custom section on homework, which is really going to collect baseline data for the district action team that we will be creating, taking a look at our homework policies and practices. Parent and staff surveys close tomorrow. Student surveys close next Friday. The majority of the survey was designed by our online SEL partner, Panorama Education. So they developed the questions, they test them, they norm them throughout the country. And what we tried to do was take those parent and we tried to take the staff and the student questions, which were developed by Panorama, and then crosswalk them over to a survey we made in Google that would allow us to easily compare the three different areas. So here's a question about return to school. Here's how the parents answered. Here's how the students answered. Here's how the staff answered. There isn't a parent component to Panorama, which is why we couldn't do the survey in there. Well, there is, but there's an extra cost on that, and we thought we could do it more efficiently in Google. So that's where I talk about aiming for consistency among the three surveys to allow for clear comparisons. And although the surveys close tomorrow, preliminary parent data indicates that parents want their students to be in school more. That's what 83% of our parents said. Approve of our levels of COVID-related safety measures, 81%. And communication has been clear, 94%. That's not something we see very often in an organization. So we're proud of that. So a complete survey analysis of all the areas will be available for the public in November. In the meantime, Chuck and I will be meeting with each of the building faculties either during a lunch hour or after school to present the data and answer any questions or concerns staff members have about it. Any questions about that? And so the next piece I wanted to present, just really a quick update if anyone's curious. So in August, or right at the start of school, I gave an enrollment report, and in that report, I updated what we had as far as student choices for hybrid and all virtual instruction. And I was curious to know what change, if any, we had from then to now. And we're trending in the right direction. It's not a statistically significant shift, but we see that we had 86% hybrid at the start of the school year, and now we're at 89%. So we're seeing more and more families opt to go from all virtual to the hybrid model of instruction, which shows us that parents are feeling a sense of comfort and a level of trust in the school district to have their students return now when they didn't have that level of comfort at the start of the school year. So we'll continue to closely monitor this.
No questions for Gino?
All right. Back to Chuck. We've got, thanks, Gino. We're going to talk about some progress on the phase 2 planning, winter sports, and also best conference.
We're going to save the best for last, but phase 2 is the third, so let's have more time on that than the other two.
Okay.
So winter sports, Justin, I believe, asked about winter sports at the last meeting, and between now and then, the governor signed the Executive Order 187, which allows for medium high-risk sports to participate in the winter. So we will have winter athletics in the school district. It is a limited season. I think it's 15 games or competitions per sport. It's a limited capacity for seating, and the way it's written, it kind of gives you the impression you may have fans, but you will not have fans. Because the 25 number includes participants. So if you take even basketball, which is very small, if there's 8 guys on each team or 8 girls on each team, 2 players, there's 16, 3 coaches each, referees, scorekeepers, athletic, you're 25, then that's it, you're hit your limit. So at this point in time, there will be sports, it appears, they will be happening, there will not be fans, but as you know, or may know, we've been live streaming all of our games in the stadium, and we'll do the same thing. So every home competition will be live streamed through our YouTube channel. So we'll have that in place for that. But this led to, and by the way, they're not sure what they're doing about postseasons yet. Some sports probably can have postseasons, others cannot. Wrestling simply can't have a wrestling tournament that has, the wrestling state tournament's got 30 guys in a weight class and 14 weight. That just simply can't happen. Swimming, maybe. Basketball, if you have individual games, we may be able to play basketball season now. So they're still deciding at the NJSIA. But that did lead to the conversation that was alluded to in the finances, that we do have HYBA, youth wrestling. There's a bunch of people who use our facilities in the winter, and we are going to allow that. We're going to let these groups use it, but and Mike is going to send a communication out to them tomorrow. There will be really limited space because areas that we used to use, they used to use, are now being used for something else. For example, the APRs in the elementary schools are as much storage space as anything else right now. So the space is not going to be available. So we're going to let them, whenever we're not using the space, it'll be made available, but we'll make it clear that there is going to be limited space for the Class 2 organizations, the community organizations to use our space. Any questions about that?
I have a question on that. So if the Class 2 organization is using our space, are they working within the same limitations that all organizations?
Yes, they
are?
should.
Are we
I think
enforcing
we're
that?
put explicitly, if that's a good question, but they have to follow all NJSA guidelines.
Okay.
So that's same number, no fans, the masks on the sidelines, all their health procedures as well. I left this off here, but I made a note. For the first time ever that I know of in Haddonfield Memorial High School history, this Sunday, the National Honor Society induction will happen in the stadium. So we have an outdoor National Honor Society induction. That way all the parents can be there because you can put 500 people there. I think there's about 109 students going in. So it's our first ever outdoor NHS. The weather looks nice, which is good. And if we like it, maybe this will become a thing. The Alpha Best update, which is also requested at last week. The numbers are low. You can see aftercare, they have a total of 16. That's between Tatum and Elizabeth Haddon. Central has no aftercare. There's no one using it there. On Wednesdays, we offer a full day, and there's 7 students participating in that. Alpha Best did offer during that November break full day every day. There were no takers, so that's not happening. And they're getting a lot of questions about pre-care, before school care. So that's something we have to talk about because that's a different animal because they're coming in before school with cleaning. So we're talking with them about whether we can make that happen. So that's the Alpha Best update. And one of the things I wanted to add too, a lot of questions have come up about Wednesdays and virtual Wednesdays and what they look like. So I asked Dr. Mary Colleen to talk us through what actually the purpose of virtual Wednesdays, what's happening there, so we could all have a better understanding of what this is. So
that's great. Thank you. So about the typical Wednesday, what we're noticing as we look forward to phase 2 is we're asking the questions, are the reasons why we wanted to keep Wednesday virtual, are they still valid? And the answer is yes. But we also knew that there were problems with the typical Wednesday as well. And so I wanted to just kind of work through and show you what the typical Wednesday looks like at each of the school levels. So we'll start with this next slide shows you a typical class schedule for a Wednesday. So you'll see that every minute is planned out for the child. So we have heard of parents saying, well, my child is finished in an hour and a half. And so, to that, there's differentiation that should be going on. And so we would hope that you would just reach out to your teacher and they could help try to figure out how to, enrich the experience. But really, the whole Wednesday is like carefully planned out minute by minute at the elementary level by the teachers, and they do that planning kind of all week long in the afternoons. But also there's some time on Wednesday that they work together with their colleagues. So on the next slide, it shows the advantages and the concerns that we've been honing in on. The advantages are that it allows the teachers to meet with their all virtual students more frequently. So the teachers are meeting at least twice a week with their all virtual students, and to schedule that in is no easy feat. And so Wednesday really helps with that. I would argue the biggest benefit of the Wednesdays from an instructional point of view is the common planning time. Something that we just seem to be very short on is collaboration time for teachers to help each other out, to try to find ways to do things better together. So that common planning time has made all the difference in the world. If you'll notice that things are going really well for your child, it's probably in large part due to that common planning time that's led by the teacher leaders and the principals as well. It's also time for special ed mandates. And there's also time for one-to-one support with struggling students. So if you looked at a teacher's schedule, you might see 20 different blocks of time during a given day where they're carving out that time to meet with those students one-to-one who might be struggling. It's also time for the asynchronous planning. So all of the work that's done asynchronously, it's very time intensive. Which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. It gives a teacher a break from the open tab syndrome. So this one might sound a little, flaky, but if you've been in the teacher's situation where they're trying to teach to a class full of students that, and then also students at home, and then also needing to think about, what's happening with the all virtual students, it's creating so many decisions that have to be made in a given day, which is it's known that it's the burden of the teacher's life to begin with, that they have this thing called decision fatigue, because no career like it makes you have to make so many decisions on a given day that it wears you out. And, so it's bad for teacher SEL, but it's also bad for productivity. So we wanted to make sure that we could try to protect some of that, sanity, if you will. So some of the concerns we have with Wednesdays are that kids need more face-to-face time, and we're seeing that in the parent survey responses that Dr. Priola pointed out. 84% of the parents surveyed said that they wanted their kids in more. So we're seeing that parents are asking for less screen time. So we are concerned about screen time, and we are concerned about, student engagement. Because if you do have if your child is the one who is finishing in an hour and a half on Wednesday, that's not very engaging for your child. So some enhancements that it provides, like I said, the common planning time, the deeper personalization that you kind of can't get any other way, targeted learning, and it does improve school to parent communication as well. So those are things we're looking to build on as well. So the next slide shows you the middle school and the high school advantages and concerns and some enhancements. The advantages are that they're able to work through their whole entire schedule. Teachers like Julie Smart in the high school said that it's odd that it's very hard to build community when you've got kids in the classroom and at home at the same time. But on Wednesdays, it's very good for being able to reach all of your students at the same time. And I thought that was compelling. Group work, Kyle Williams in the high school said that group work is a lot smoother, especially when it comes to lab work. Easier for I said that. So it gives a teacher a break from the open tab syndrome. I want to reiterate that I heard this from multiple teachers, that just not having to speak so loudly over a mask all day and juggle so many things, it kind of just eases that a little bit. And we do need to be protective of our teachers, and it allows them to see their virtual students up to 3 times a week. Some are even, more than that. So the same concerns. Kids need more face-to-face time, less screen time, and some enhancements are that because it is virtual, there's more class time. If this was, say, for instance, a face-to-face day, we'd have to eat up some of the class time for, the change of classes. So those are some enhancements. I believe that is it. Chuck, would you hit the next slide for Mr. Klaus? Okay, questions and comments. I'm not used to not being in control of the presentation.
Any questions or comments for Colin about that Wednesday model?
I'll add a comment. I think people look at Wednesdays and, they question, they say, well, look, in a pre-COVID environment, teachers didn't have common, planning time. You couldn't take a Wednesday pre-COVID. And so what is it about COVID, that means we really need this Wednesday? So maybe.
Sure, I'd love to talk to that, Justin. So one of the things that you might remember, the principals reorganized the schedules for this year, they were supposed to take place. It was going to be the first time in I don't know how long that we would have had that common planning time for the elementary teachers. It's kind of almost unheard of that the elementary teachers wouldn't have that common planning time. So really, it's just something that we should have been doing all along, and and the result is that it's a little disjointed of an experience. So if you've heard parents say, well, my child is in third grade at this school, and her friend is in a different school, it's a different experience. It's meant to clean up a lot of that, and it's meant to help the teachers be able to be more targeted with their instruction.
Yeah, and so to that, I would say, so what are we gonna do, once we're out of this current environment? You're still gonna need that common planning time. So, we're not gonna reserve the Wednesdays after COVID, and I completely get there are, virtual students and allows for more time with them, but I think, the community would push back and say, well, what about, the afternoons, Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, which doesn't seem like it's enough. I'm trying to voice all the concerns that I think people are gonna have around this, because we're gonna have to solve for common planning time, after COVID hopefully disappears.
We did purchase scheduling software for elementary schools, which does, as Colin just said, lock in one common planning time every week. So that is helpful. You're right. There are a lot of concerns and questions that still have to be clarified and put out there, Justin. And, one of the things that happened about a week and a half ago that shows how one of the benefits of this is we had a teacher who was sick, and her colleagues were able to teach her classes remotely while the teacher was sick. So instead of just bringing a sub in and those students doing nothing in those 2 days the teacher was out, they were able to continue with the program because all the teachers in that building were on the exact same page and the exact same day. That is something we'd like to see in the future. It's coming. That's something that should be happening, and that we'll work toward that.
Chuck, I could be not remembering this correctly, but to address what Justin said, weren't the elementary schools before all this hit, weren't they talking about completely reworking their schedule
Right, yes.
in order to allow for some of that common planning
Correct.
time prior to school for the teachers? Yes.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
And they would have had that in place.
That was actually developed in the spring, it had to be scrapped.
Right.
When we went to.
When you say scrapped, we're just postponing it, correct?
Correct.
It's still
Correct.
Okay, all right. We're not going back to.
No.
Yeah.
So
This was
when-
the shortening
when
of.
we
We
get-
just couldn't implement that schedule in this current setup.
Yeah.
So when we get back to some sense of normal schedule, then that common planning time will be
Will
built.
exist.
Okay.
And that's why all the specials went to the same block of time.
Correct.
So there weren't large ones and short ones,
Yeah.
so it could all fit in that way. And then at the high school and the middle school level, one of the other things from a common planning time was the late Wednesday starts throughout the year. We scaled that back for our schedule, but we still have the 4 in there for common planning across the district.
And that's data analysis and other things as well. Right? Not as much.
Oh, sure, that's more data
Those
analysis.
type of things, right. Yeah,
Well, we tied that in.
Yes.
But if that could be expanded if necessary for that. And then at the high school level, there's a lot more time opportunities to create those buckets.
Yes. And there's a lot more. The high school suffers from a lot of things. One is that there's a lot more standalone courses, or standalone teachers. So you have one teacher might be the only person teaching AP biology. So the common planning time is not necessary there. But where you suffer is when you have courses where a lot of people are teaching it. For instance, a World Civ or an English 9. The ability to stray away from each other is the tendency happens, and it's too easy to do because we don't have that kind of planning time. And you would benefit greatly. They would benefit greatly. I'm sure they would tell you if they also could have that locked in. But that's it's a little more difficult with the high school schedule, but it really is something we should try to look to get in their world as well. It'll benefit the teaching. It'll benefit the students. It'll keep consistency from teacher to teacher. There's many benefits to that.
You have a little more flexibility with the Bell schedule, though, to be able to carve out those times if we
Yes,
or wanted to. Oh, they're not popular, but not saying that that there's not
That's a different
trade-offs.
conversation.
I want to sort of where the rubber meets the road, the rub, whatever, but I want to reiterate what Justin's saying, because I've heard a lot of this too. I mean, the parents, first of all, I'll say that we're doing, I think, a better job than 95% of the school districts. I haven't heard anyone say that their school district's doing a better job. So we have to give everyone credit for that. I think, but you're still talking to parents, who are having children struggle, and they're watching their kids have a better experience when they're listening to their teacher. And that Wednesday is a rub. It's a rub, right? It's like, we get 2 days, or they're looking at this sort of day of videos, day of not connecting, and they're saying, God, it's not a nasty comment. It's like, God, can we get our kids with our teachers because they're doing better when they're together? And I think, so I mean, just to reiterate, that's what I'm hearing too. And it's not a judgment. It's not saying that they don't need it. Like our administration has a better grasp on what it takes to run a classroom and run a district, obviously. But what you're hearing from Justin, and I would reiterate, so parents are saying, man, our kids are doing better the more time they have with the teacher, and they're salivating over those Wednesdays. They know they can't have them Thursdays and Fridays, right? But these Wednesdays are like, it's like I would love to have my kid experiencing, Mr. So-and-so, even for another hour or another half an hour on Wednesday, even every week. So I think that's what the parents are saying to us, at least to some of us. So, yeah, okay.
I hear the same thing. We are discussing Wednesdays as we're looking at phase 2.
Yeah.
I mean, they're right now, they're there. We don't have a model nailed down yet, but it's certainly something we're looking at doing in different ways of doing it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, maybe you're turning back to, maybe you're going exactly there. Just before you transition to Adam, were you planning on talking about tonight, or if not tonight, when, what options there are for phase 2 and why you decided on, maybe looking at a limited amount rather than why certain ones were excluded, or?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the next step.
Before we go on, just something to follow up on your winter sports and the live streaming. Is there an opportunity for a more permanent fixture of that through the club structure, broadcast, announcers?
I don't see any reason why not. That would be a great idea. We actually have a young man who did some announcing for the football last year, who's away at college now. He's got his own radio show as a freshman already, who's a great announcer. So we would certainly encourage that. That would be a potential for a really neat, a very valuable group for people to do, right? So the people who have that interest can.
Well, I'm just bringing up because it would be probably a stipend position for the faculty advisor and something finance would have to scrub up.
You have to fight some parents who want the microphone. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Anyway, all right.
All right.
I think.
That would be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take us through our status of our phase 2 planning. I'm going to preface this by saying when I went over our plans in the summer, we were all virtual. I was able to stand at my kitchen table and pace when I did this. So I paced my talk. It's difficult for me to sit still and do this. So if I look a little antsy, be prepared. The question I'm getting when I'm talking to people about this is why now, right? Numbers in Camden County have not stabilized. I understand that. And we're heading cold and flu season. All these things are happening. All the reasons why we shouldn't look at this now. And my answer is that planning has to occur. This is not something that's going to happen in 48 or 72 hours, right? This is a 4 to 6 week process. By the time we plan, we move facilities, things will have to change. We'll have to change schedules, rewrite schedules. It's going to take time. And if we wait for the numbers to go down, then we're 6 weeks out of there. So if we wait till the numbers go down, that's January 15th. Now we're March before we can really move, because it's not going to be something that happens overnight. The road back explicitly says you just need to give people 30 days notice on your plan. And that being said, we're looking at if we decide next week, by next Thursday, the 29th, to move to a different plan, we're talking December before we move this forward, because it does take time. We can't not plan on things, things, right? So it is likely that winter sports may not happen, but there's a plan for it in case it can happen, right? So that's what we're looking at. It's important for us to remember that. Area schools all around us who are full virtual are now coming back. You know, there are other people, other things happening at this same time where people are looking to say, we need to change what we're doing because we have the ability to change what we're doing. So I liken this to when Cherry Hill, who's been full virtual, is coming back on November 9th. They are changing at the same time that I think we should be looking at changing. So that's another reason. And Executive Order 187, I mean, our governor has been very conservative with these things. And he's saying we can play sports, we can wrestle, which is going to be one of the more dangerous. We can do those things. So I think even though those numbers are maybe not what we want, I don't think we can wait for the numbers. I think we have to be prepared for when the numbers are what we want, we can move. And without planning now, we're not doing our jobs because we're not getting ready for that move. And ultimately, in the red, we understand that in-person instruction is better. And we need to try to get our kids more of that. We really do need that. It's an important thing. So what we're watching and whom we're listening to. So I have, and I'm talking about the tab stress. I've got on my one screen, like all 10 tabs are nothing but COVID information. I click on them almost to an obsession. Like I see if they change by the hour, right? Even though I know they're updated daily or weekly, I still click on them every day. We're looking at our county numbers. You know, the Department of Health made it very clear that, you know, you have to be careful what type of numbers you look at, because if you pick too small of a sample size, a couple cases can throw you off. So they recommend not looking at municipality numbers, too small of a sample size. They actually look more regionally in their thing. So we're looking at county numbers. We're looking at infection rates in both the state and the counties. We're doing those. We're looking at the CALI, the COVID Activity Level Index. And that's made up of, it's actually made up of the case rates, the COVID-like illness, and the percent positivity. So those three things come together. I'm going to show you some of those forms. And they have a formula that puts you in an area, green, yellow, orange, or red. And that indicates in our region where we are as far as COVID activity. The Department of Health, talking to constantly, hearing from, and we talk to our nurses and our doctor, and we talk to them, get medical advice from them. So this is today. This is Camden County today. I took this snapshot earlier today. You can see today there were 62 cases reported. Yesterday was 25. Right? So that up and down is the reason why I think we have to be ready for it. If it was all the way up there, then that's one thing to look at. But I think we keep an eye on this. Rate of transmission, this is a state rate, is 1.14, and the county rate is 1.15. These are both as of today. I think we all know one is that magic number. That means it's not spreading anymore. Above it means it's spreading. And these are the Cali charts. So these come out every Thursday, and these are you can see September 26th is this one, where most of the state was green. Here we go. This is October 3rd, and then October 10th and October 17th. So these are where we are. So right now the entire state is in moderate, which is the yellow. If you look down here, the numbers, you can see that they all have different levels and standards. And if you want to look at these more closely, when we post this PowerPoint tomorrow, you can look at it, because here's how those numbers go. So if you notice for the case rate, moderate is 1 to 10. And you notice that the Southwest is where we are, is a 9.64. So we're right close to that going to the next level with that. But the other one, so we see we're 2.1 in percent CLI, and 2.1 in percent CLI is down more toward the bottom, right? So we're close in some and the others. So that's just things you can look at. And these are the type of things we're looking at as we go through. So we talked about, we started our process, right? And we had meetings, we had ongoing meetings, we had full leadership meetings. We've met 4 times, I think. And so to put in the challenge we're facing right now, when this summer came on and we had to develop a plan, I think we met 8 days in a row for 8 hours a day type of thing. We met 2 full weeks for entire days to put this together. These meetings now are going on while principals are running buildings and things are happening, and they can't just take a full day and put it aside. So we're doing 3 hours there or 4 hours there. So it's not as much time dedicated full. The other thing we learned almost from the first minute was we had, if you look back at our roadback plan, we had a phase 2. We knew that phase 2 was not going to work as we thought it would because we learned so much. Almost started from scratch. Not quite started from scratch because we have some ideas of what we were facing. Because we had most in the summer was unknown. But really we had to go back pretty much to the drawing board. And so it's been a lot of that type of work about breaking down. We have the surveys out. I've given the status update today. Next week, I want to give a more honed in form of what model we've chosen because we don't have a chosen model at this given point in time because the surveys are still out there. We're meeting with teachers. We'll completely review the surveys and then we're going to implement a window based on regional health data. So we're going to look at the data as we get it together. But we have to have it together as we look at the data so we can move when we need to. All right. So I'm going to show you 2 models that we're leaning toward. They're not A and B, and they're not 1 and 2 for a reason, because that would indicate that we're leading what this is the competition we wanted to. We're going to show you the pluses and minuses of the different models we have. That way you'll have an idea of the type of things we're talking about. We're down to these 2 models, Heather. I think that was one of the questions asked earlier. We viewed other ones, but these 2 just seem to be make the most sense for a couple reasons. One is that staying cohort models for a full day, which is one model, is something we're used to the cohorts. The other would be just mornings only for everyone in the mornings. The morning afternoons don't work because it was alluded to for the Wednesday piece. The full virtual students take what a terrible sentence. Take an extraordinary amount of time to focus on those individuals because we have to give them the same allotment of time as all the students. So if you had a morning afternoon A-B cohort, there would be no time for the teachers to meet virtually with the full virtual students. In essence, we have to hire teachers to teach the virtual students because there's just going to be simple time in the day. So we kind of honed down to these 2 models because they're the ones that seem to fit best where we are. The other side about these 2 is both of them, if we backslide, if we went forward and you backslide, both of these would be more easily transferred to coming back. I think they wouldn't cause as much disruption as completely blowing up what we have. So we're trying to work based on some basis what we have. So while we started from scratch, we realized that it's important to keep the stuff we have working well and build off of that as opposed to throw everything out and try to start over again, especially if we have to go back and forth. So elementary, we look at these considerations. So there's 2 are extension of the day. Stay in cohorts, but go full school day, or bring everyone in just in the mornings. And then the afternoon would be specials and the online, the asynchronous pieces. So I feel like I should stand up over and point the screen. So you can see we extend the day. You're still being 2 persons a week as compared versus 5 for the combined cohort. This is the big one here. If you look at this slide, and I can't hide that because it's a PowerPoint. In-person time, right now, our students are getting 8.5 hours in-person time for core instruction. If we go to extension of the day, that'll add basically 4.5 hours of in-person instruction a week, but that's not all core, that's also some specials in there. But 13. If we go with the full cohort in the morning, you're getting another 12.7 hours of instructional time face-to-face. Ultimately, and this is one of those pieces. We're looking at risk reward, right? So we're looking at both of these models are going to pose safety issues between losing the social distancing or eating lunch with a mask off, right? They're both going to pose challenges in that area of those safety issues. And so we ultimately have to say, where's our comfort level compared to the difference in instructional time and pieces? Yes.
Yeah, I just have a question. Are these hypotheticals based on our best idea of what any new restrictions might look like?
New restrictions?
Well, because currently, if we came up with something like this, it might not have passed as much in September.
Well, both of these models, so that's a great question. So while we're talking to people and they say, well, we get the questions of why this shouldn't happen. There are NutriServe, who's our food, is serving lunch in 56 schools in South Jersey right now. So there are people serving lunch. There are schools that have full capacity right now, whose plans have been approved, as long as you're showing appropriate safety measures. So yes, they would be passed by the county. We could get this through. I mean, private schools are different than public schools, right? Because people are choosing to send their children there, as opposed to this is your school and now we're going to impose something on you you may be uncomfortable with. Right? That's one of the things we spoke about at the last curriculum committee. One of the best things about our current plan is very few people had to sit and probably scratch their head and say, man, I really have a hard time deciding this, because I think the 12 to 14% of people who are full virtual now, we're going to be full virtual most likely, I'm guessing, shouldn't say this out loud, but anyway, whatever we do next is going to cause some people to maybe say, I'm not comfortable, I'm going to hold my kid home. We try to avoid that, but I think that's just the reality of our time. We're going to have to do that right now. Because as we talk about phase 2, we're going to have to decide that, yeah, we're going to make some people have to make a choice we hope not have to make, but it may be there. And one of the things also we're looking at is the middle school and high school model could be a little different, because we're looking at we realize that it doesn't have to be one size fits all. But that number right there, that number of instructional pieces, is one of the big things we're really. It's hard to look at that and dismiss it outright. Right? It's hard to look at that number and say, forget it. Wednesdays, it says remaining to be determined. They're still up. We're talking about those. You would get some special area classes in elementary. And the challenges for the extension of the day, you see lunches. Supervision of lunches is also a big thing, not just the masks off, because the teachers eat lunch at the same time as the students do. Who's going to supervise the kids at lunch? They're going to be spread out. I can tell you, we're meeting with teachers and meeting with a lot of people. The concern about lunch was very real. I don't want to be in the cafeteria duty when everyone takes their mask off and eats. I don't want to be that person who's in that duty. That came across from not just a few people. That was a very common theme we saw. Grouping small checks with teachers. The cohort combination is the obvious thing. Social distancing will be minimal, right? It'll be instead we're roughly 6 feet now. It's going to be closer to 3 feet, maybe even a little less in some of our smaller classrooms.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
In those circumstances, were you talking about purchasing more protective?
we are. So if we were to go for the full morning, 100 everyone in full morning, we would be buying 3-sided dividers for everyone pre-K to 8, and we were looking at getting HEPA air cleaners for every classroom in the district. So there were 2 more PPEs things we would be putting in as part of that plan.
Do you have estimated how much that plexiglass would cost? And
It's about $24,000 for the plexiglass. Roughly $24,000.
Didn't we have funding for that already?
We have some funding.
Yes,
for that.
like we have stuff like.
So,
we have, like,
we can use
money
CARES
for
Act
that.
money for that. We have some CARES money left, so we have some stuff.
could that money be used for something else that's even COVID related? Like, I'm gonna put it out there, and there will be people who disagree with me, but I just think that's a Band-Aid that makes people feel better, but it's really ineffective. And I personally, if there were other things we could spend the money on, I don't think the plexiglass is gonna stop air from coming over or under, and it's gonna create more surface area that needs to be cleaned.
It's a good point.
Wait, Chuck's not deciding to buy plexiglass,
No, I'm
because
just
he
throwing
thinks
it
it's a
out
good
there.
idea, this is what, we're going with.
The row back says specifically, if you're closer than 6 foot social distance, they recommend barriers between students, and that's the reason why we did that. I wouldn't disagree with the fact that.
But they're also not, we're not talking about personal opinions of administrators or board members. We're talking about science and data and the guidance,
Yeah,
which is
the
totally
science that I've
different
seen
than.
shows that it's not effective, but I just wanted to share it right now.
No,
so
I
don't
just-
follow
that's
up
fine.
with
I
it.
just don't want people that are watching thinking we're making decisions in public or behind closed doors based on our feelings. Like, we have to follow data and we have to follow guidance, and that's our responsibility. not to impart our opinion on what we think is safe.
When
Being
you
that
told
I
me
work
the
in
very
finance, I
beginning, I'm
wouldn't-
fine.
I wouldn't have the first idea, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
Secondary we're also, secondary considerations. So here's secondary considerations. It's very similar. We were looking at maybe going full capacity, combine the cohorts, morning pre-K to 5 and 6 to 8 stay in the cohort model. Well, looking at this, once again, looking at that, the gained time in person instruction, the middle school and high school would look the same way. The virtual Wednesdays would probably remain the same day because they're meeting with all the classes anyway. So you can see some of the things there. It's basically the same concerns and the same things we're looking at with the 6 to 12 piece. Just looking at these, so the combined cohorts, the advantages, the big one is 12.75 hours a week, removes virtual Wednesday for the most part, avoids lunch and mask removal, and overall positive replies. That's from the survey. Concerns are we have the instruction time, contact tracing casts a wider net. I'm not sure why instruction time is there. That probably should be mistyped. Contact tracing is one of these things, right? So contact tracing is based on distance, right? That's how it's done. So when someone comes back positive, you see who's close to them for more than 10 minutes. And we just got the Washington Post just put out the CDC. New Jersey uses 10 minutes. The CDC uses 15 minutes. And it was 15 minutes before, it was 15 minutes in a row. The CDC just is saying now 15 minutes over a 24-hour period of time. That really doesn't affect us because we're talking about kids sitting next to each other in class. They're not going to be, the 15 minutes is a given, or 10 minutes is a given. So what's going to happen is if we go to a full capacity model, if that were the choice, you have more children closer to each other within the 6 feet. So right now it's only one person. If we go to the full capacity, it's probably going to be 2 people. So you'd have more contact tracing to do, and therefore more students excluded from school if there were a positive case. So an example is right now, based on positive cases in school, we've had 3. We've excluded, which means we don't quarantine people, we exclude them technically. We've excluded 35 students and 2 teachers from school for a period of time. If we were full capacity, it'd probably be like 43 students and 2 teachers because 29 of the students were an extracurricular club, right? So the actual students excluded because they were sitting in class next to someone was 5. So when looking at the seating charts, it'd probably be another 6 kids maybe. So it might be 11 total at this point in time. So the contact tracing is something that can become tricky. The cohort model is made to prohibit contact tracing because a look back period of 2 days. I mean, you are losing the contact tracing advantage by going to the full capacity. That is a challenge between the 2. And we talked about the enhancements put in place. You have increased exposure time, decreased social distancing. And we talked about the HEPA air cleaners and desk shields. The extension of the day, you get more in-person instruction, 90 minutes core, and then elementary 90 minutes special area. You're maintaining the social distance and contact tracing. You get some in-person area classes. The concerns are the in-person instruction isn't what it's going to be. Lunch can be a difficult thing. Increased exposure time because you're there longer in the day. Virtual Wednesdays would still stay intact. And then virtual student check-ins become very much more difficult because the afternoons now are being used for the virtual students, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. You would lose that ability to have your check-ins in the afternoon with your virtual students. So we have to find another time to do that. That's another challenge in that. And then we need to fully revise all the schedules. They simply would not, what we're doing right now wouldn't work schedule-wise with specials. And if you think about how specials work, because we've all had elementary children, if we on a 4-day rotation, specials work because they're a 5-day rotation. So that Wednesday missing disrupts the special schedule. So we'd have to rewrite our entire schedule, which is something we could do, but that would be something that have to happen there. These are some recent articles, and when you get this, you can look at these. Yes.
With the extension of the day, would you also provide the additional HEPA folders? Or are you doing it in the other scenario pool?
I guess we could, but we're not planning on it because you're the same space with the same
So
number of
it's not
people.
like there's money that is going unused on a grant for COVID?
No, no.
The HEPA filters in the other scenario, are you doing individual classroom ones or are you
Yes.
doing?
So currently, we have HEPA air cleaners in all of our classrooms that don't have access to windows. And those devices are based on the square footage of the classroom space. So we have 4 or 5 various size units that we have in the district, not one a year, but a third of them. So we have approximately, I want to say close to 40 devices right now. And obviously that will go up quite significantly for all classrooms.
There's just some articles that came out in the last week or so that we kind of are reading and considering, and that's so we are right now in the midst of working our way through this, and these are the 2 models we're honing in on, and you can see the differences in the 2. So with that, any other additional questions or comments?
Well, can you just clarify the definition of excluding? You're excluding from in-person instruction.
So for a person excluded from school, they can attend virtually, but they cannot come to school or school activities.
How about the teacher?
Same thing. So the
They
teacher
can teach
they
remotely
teach remotely, yes.
and not take a day.
Correct.
And
That's
not-
right.
They're asymptomatic.
For how long?
Sure, of course. I mean, if they're not feeling well, they're not feeling well, but
How long is the exclusion?
The exclusion is 14 days from the last date of contact, which is, yeah, so that's what it is. So there's a lot of different numbers and for our purposes, the only thing we do is 14 days from the last day of contact.
Would you mind saying a few more words about, because the vast majority of people, 86 to 90% of people are hybrid, that are not virtual, so they may not understand the obligations for teachers, and not just whatever the obligations are, but what they actually do for the virtual students, because people are going to hear, half day, 5 days a week. Well, that certainly sounds better than what we have now. So sign me up, except for the fact that now they're going to combine the cohorts and they're going to be closer together. And so why can't we just put them up by AM, PM? I know you've already spoken to it, but maybe say a little bit more because most people don't understand exactly what's happening for virtual students.
So
Can you also differentiate the elementary versus middle and high school? Because
the models are very similar. So that we put them definitely because the one thing that will be different, the high school and middle school will run their schedule. So specials are part of their schedule. So when we talk about instruction time, that's a little bit different because it doesn't change the instruction time. For the elementary, one of the big keys is that the instructional time gained will tend to be specials and not core subject areas. So that is notable difference. The high school and middle school may keep, if we go with the full combined cohorts, elementary would be 5 days a week, and we would eliminate virtual Wednesday. Middle and high school, we're still talking about what we would do with virtual Wednesday because it's working well for them at this point in time. So that's one of the big differences between the 2. Like I said, at one point we were really leaning to, Chuck was leaning to, I shouldn't say we, I can't speak for the whole team. Combined cohorts in pre-K to 5 and 6 to 8 with the full day extension because Wednesday was working well with them. And because they changed classes. And changing classes is the contact tracing challenge, right? Elementary, you're with the same group of 23 all day long, so the contact tracing is pretty simple. When you go to 8 classes, I have to contact trace you. I've now got to contact trace 8 classes. So we were considering that. So that's one of the reasons why we have the 2 models to look at those 2. Because, if you think about the contact tracing challenges, cohort model may make more sense. And especially since the older kids can probably handle the hybrid model better than the 7, 8, 9-year-olds. I mean, there's a challenge in those differences too, that if you stay in extended day cohort, the high school and middle school could probably manage their way through that better and save the contact tracing Whereas I think the hybrid side, the virtual side of the hybrid model for our younger students is showing to be challenging. So that's why we're looking at both of those that way.
That was helpful, but on Justin's original question about talking about the virtual
Right.
student instruction in the afternoons, and the reason why I asked to differentiate is because I think that's very different for, high school and middle school, they're live streaming. So I don't think there's that individual reach out to virtual only students because they're able to follow the classes. So I believe that's what you're saying is the challenge with
Right, so-
eliminating Wednesdays for elementary school, and I wanted to confirm that it's really just elementary.
It's not just, it's elementary focus, yes, although they're, because the office hours and stuff in high school, they're more independent of the child. But the virtual students, to answer your question, Justin, we have to provide the same level of education, not the exact same for all of our virtual students. That was very specific in the executive order. And which means they get the live streaming piece. But when since they're not physically in class those 2 days, we have an obligation to have one-on-one or small group time instruction virtually with those students that we're not obliged to have with our students who are in class. So,
I could add a bit to that if that's all right. I heard a great example this morning. Some teachers were talking about how when they teach phonics, when they teach guided reading, they have the student trace the book with their finger, and when you're face to face, that's super easy to do, and they can troubleshoot and offer guidance. But if you're providing that kind of activity for the students at home, it has to be really carefully designed. And so, we did invest in Seesaw last year, which was an incredible choice. It was a really great pick. And they have a huge array of, things that you can pick online that the teachers could easily assign and kind of be done with it. But since the teachers are trying so hard to make it truly personalized, and just as Mr. Klaus was saying, how we want to make sure that it's the same quality experience for the virtual students, but it means a lot of extra design time. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So we're back. We'll go.
Has the state signaled at all an update to the road back? If you just take you learn more every day, and we're going to be learning more about as these other schools are coming online. Has the BOE or the state signaled an update to the road back guidance?
I have not heard of it. So we're right back at it Monday. We're meeting again Monday. We're meeting with our district pandemic response team. We're meeting with the leadership team. The steering committee for the road back, we're meeting with that group next week. So we have kind of where we are, which is these two different models we're going back and forth with the pluses and minuses, and we're going to hopefully by this time next week I'll be telling you kind of where we're focused and drilled down on, because it might be the cohort model, it might be the combined cohort, it might be a combination of both. But it won't be something completely different. It's going to be what we see here is going to be the basis of what we're moving forward with. And as I said, it might be different for different grade levels.
I know you said that there was a big concern about lunch during the full day and that particular possibility. Was it discussed, and would we have the availability to either strongly encourage that students go home for lunch without making it mandatory, or even potentially making it mandatory? And I'll stress, I don't want to create a hardship for any parent, but I sit there and I debate, if they're already picking up their kids at half day right now, would it be feasible to bring them home for lunch and back after lunch, or is that, do you think too much of a hardship?
I think that would be too much of a hardship. I think the place lunch would be easiest is the high school because they do have open campus. Middle school would be maybe the most difficult because of space, and I don't know that we think that having the middle school kids go home is a great idea. Maybe we could consider that. But I think especially for our younger kids, I think that the time going to and from lunch eating is something that we did discuss. And the concern was that for some people it would be a real great hardship, and then you'd have that challenge. a side note to lunch is, every student in America today gets a free lunch every day, right? So, lunch would be easier in the fact that there wouldn't be any cash and they just could come up and pick their lunch up. Everyone gets a free lunch these days.
And Chuck, I know from our discussions with the admin team, when you talk about either eating lunch under that extended cohort model or doing something where students are going home, it's a great organizational lift for very little instructional payoff. So those are some of the items that have created tension when we start talking about those ideas. So we have explored that, and it always comes down to what it would take to launch that organizationally, and then what is going to be the benefit instructional, and like right here when we go through those.
And so we'll have all these posted and we'll put stuff out, and obviously we'll get this out and post all these things on the website tomorrow morning so the community can look at it. And next Thursday, as I said, we may not have our finalized idea. We'll be pretty close to where we think we should be. And then it'll change. So.
I only giggle. I know you don't want to bring personal anecdotes into these. I have 2 children that go to school all day, and they say they feel like they're in school except at lunch. They feel like lunch is almost like prison, where everything else is like school.
Most places where you eat lunch, you're in assigned seats away from the thing. People, you really kind of have to, because for contact tracing, you just can't let people gather at a table. You have to know who's sitting where next to who.
It's assigned seating.
And you have to have assigned seating and all those things.
All right, thank you, Chuck. Again, I'll just reiterate, next week I'll try to get that land swap material to you and we can discuss it. Okay, we're going to open up the floor to public comments. We do this digitally. We're going to ask our IT team to put a slide on the YouTube channel with a phone number to call in. When you call in, we ask that you please select *6 to mute your phone, and then I'll call out your phone number, and then you'll have 3 minutes to give us your thoughts. If you need more than 3 minutes, you're welcome to stay in the queue, and we can come back to you, but we want to make sure we give everyone a shot to say their piece. So that's how our policy works. I'm going to give, so the slide is up on the YouTube channel. If you would call in while. Okay, we have area code 631 ending in 70. You can *6.
Hi, my name is Monica Harris. How are you?
Hi, Monica. Good. Thanks.
Good. I just want to take the time. Thank you so much for putting these plans together. I really appreciate it. And I have to say, I am so impressed with you guys, with the plans that you guys have put together. I do want to voice my opinions on a few things. I know someone made a comment about the plexiglass, and it was frustrating because I feel like that was someone's personal opinion. And given on the guidance by the governor and other states, and especially some of the schools in our neighboring towns who do have the plexiglass, it has been proven that it does work. And if we are mirroring, other towns, what other public schools are doing, I think that is, something to be noted. And then, if we're looking at other towns and other states, there have been many public schools who are at full capacity 5 days. They haven't seen a spike. As you guys have mentioned, you've been following the COVID. I just want to say, I'm very in favor for the 5-day. My child needs it. I can see how much he's regressed because of the online. The seesaw, I do have to say, is incredible, but the amount of paperwork that I have to print and then upload just for my child to learn how to write his letters, he's in kindergarten, it's just, he's not getting as much out of it as he should be. And I am concerned that he is going to fall behind come first grade, come second grade. And, I just want to make my concerns known. And once again, I'm in favor of that. I just want to voice that. And again, thank you so much for the plans you've put together.
Thanks, Manika. Listen, it's okay if you don't, but when we do a call in, it's also part of policy. You just give your street name, not the actual address, just what street you live on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chestnut Street.
No, you didn't know. I just forget to tell you. That's a part of the policy. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks. Okay, 646 ending in 40. Yeah, that's it. 646 ending in 40. Star 6 to unmute.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Kate Flannery. I'm calling from Windsor Avenue. Thank you, Chuck, and everybody on the board for presenting these two very comprehensive plans. I was very excited to hear it. I know that, a lot of us obviously, or I should say all parents want to see us to move towards opening the schools to make sure that our children are receiving more education. I think I was really impressed with the detailed plans and the pros and cons of the individual plan, but I also think, and I think, Chuck, you alluded to this in regards to obviously paying attention to what's happening to our community and where we are with the cases. I agree with planning for sure, and we need to do that. And I agree with all the pros and cons that you presented. And I think those are very tough decisions to make. But I would also be interested to hear next week as to what kind of benchmarks that we are going to set so that we can move forward to phase 2. Are we going to look at whether the cases are coming down? Is there any percentage points as to we want to make sure to meet before we go to phase 2 or phase 3? I think those benchmarks are really important for us to understand. From one of the slides I glanced very briefly, it looked like we were also approaching the high rate at some point, and I'm not sure if I misread that. So I think that from my perspective, those data points are really important for us to pay attention, in addition to the different plans that you have pointed out. I think that the lunch is definitely going to be challenging for the groups to work with. Once the masks are off as they're eating, unless you can keep I keep saying patients, but students in individual classes, which I think will be a logistical nightmare with placing enough teachers. I do think that it will be difficult to manage, so we have to kind of figure out how we're going to do that. I think you have to also plan for buying more cleaning supplies if you are going to purchase, the other sneeze guards and the plexiglasses to make sure that we have adequate supplies, not only to buy those, but also to clean those. So these are the points that I kind of wanted to make across. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kay. Okay, that looks like it. Any comments?
Want to give it another?
Yeah, we'll give it another 15
Can I
seconds.
ask another question, Chuck? When you give a presentation, what I was envisioning in my head, and this may not be what you were envisioning, but the students would eat in the cafeteria. Was it discussed whether they could eat in their classroom to keep the classes together rather than?
It was, but supervision becomes very difficult because when you have kids spread throughout the classrooms, you have to have a teacher in there with them. So when you look, in different buildings, it will look different. In the high school, you might have the cafeteria, the A gym. You have large spaces where you can put large numbers of kids in social distancing. In the elementary school, you have your APR, which you can't, which at 6 foot, you have to have at least 6 foot with your mask off to eat. So your APRs are down to 40 or 50 kids, I think. So you would have to put them in the classrooms, which means we would have to find enough people to supervise all those students, almost a full building. We already, I think, are 13 EAs understaffed. I don't know where we find those bodies to do that. it would become a challenge.
Okay. Thanks for the explanation, Chuck. We have one more, 609 ending in 77. Can you star 6 to unmute?
Hi, Katie Morgan, Chestnut Street.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, thank you to all the administrative team and board members for all your hard work. I'm calling in tonight as a mom of 2 children at the elementary level and as a teacher of elementary students in another close by district. I know and appreciate how hard our Haddonfield teachers are working. My daughters love being at school with their teachers, although I'm not satisfied with the amount of instruction my children are receiving. Governor Murphy's mandate reads that students should be receiving 4 hours of live instruction, whether in person or remote. My children are not receiving that when they are remote. My first grader is getting 2 live meetings on Monday and Tuesday and 1 live meeting on Wednesday. I do not feel that watching pre-recorded videos and videos of other educators count as live instruction. They want to see their own teacher. My pre-K daughter does not receive any live instruction on Monday or Tuesday and 1 live meeting on Wednesday. This was not something that was brought to our attention until after we paid full tuition, as if it was a 5-day week. In my own experience in my own district, we have been back 4 days a week, full day, K to 2, and hybrid, full day, 3 to 5, busing, lunch included, specials and quints since the start of school. When home, grades 3 to 5 are remoting in all day with their class besides lunch. They're receiving more than 4 hours of live instruction, even when at home. I understand this is a hard task, as I myself had to remote a student in that was quarantining from a visit to another state. With that being said, I do feel that students remoting in is easier than one teacher planning for 2 different groups on the same day, like our Haddonfield teachers are doing. Why not teach everyone at once? My district has only had 3 cases similar to us in all 8 schools, similar with no transmission in the schools, all cases believed to have been originated from outside activities. The students feel safe at school, they're happy to be back, and they're following all the protocols to keep themselves and others safe. All students at the elementary level need to be back for more in-person instruction. I do not think students need to eat lunch at school. I propose to consider getting all the students back in the classroom by combining cohorts for 5 half days, like Mr. Klaus presented tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you very much. We have another caller, which is 856 ending in 62. Star 6 to unmute. Okay, you're go ahead.
Hi, this is Kelly Testa, East Summit Avenue.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi. So, as you know, I still believe that we should have our kids in school full time. I don't really think either of these proposals are good, but if I had to choose one, I would choose the 5 days a week to 12:45. Going back and forth has been very difficult, and the proposal that someone suggested going back and forth for lunch is quite frankly absurd. You know, parents work. Even if they're working from home, it's hard enough to go pick them up at lunchtime and bring them home, feed them, and hurry up so they can get back on for the afternoon sessions. There's no way to bring them back and forth. I have a son in middle school. You know, you say that he's supposed to be getting, 4 hours of core instruction each day as he's there. He doesn't. He goes in tomorrow morning and he has study hall from 8 to 9. He has physical education on the other day. He's not getting the education that he needs and that he deserves. He glazes over on the computer. He's on the computer 3 full days and then half days on the other 2 days. It's not the education that he needs. And then when he has these mandatory meets in the afternoon, they're not for extended periods of time when, quite frankly, I could be having him tutored, but they're mandatory, so he has to be there. Same thing with my daughter. This is really unacceptable. And, I'm not quite sure why you don't have a model nailed down yet. We're 6 weeks in. Why weren't these models nailed down 3 weeks ago? You have 83% of the people who want their kids in school more. They want their kids in school, I would say, a lot more. I've spoken to so many parents in town. People want their kids in school full time. You're not offering that at all. And you have 83% of the people, you don't need any more surveys. Put our kids back in school, give them the education that they deserve. Thank you.
All right, Kelly, thank you. That looks like it is it for callers. So I'll have John switch us back to meeting. We're going to review our agenda for voting next week. We're going to have quite a few commendations next week. Chuck will be giving us a report on the vision of a Haddonfield graduate, and we'll be getting our curriculum committee.
We're also gonna have our student rep back next week.
Our student rep will be back. Okay, yeah, we're trying to get.
It's gonna be good to get kids back.
Yes.
Yeah. Who's gonna be here? Do we know yet or no? Okay. All right, let's power through the agenda. Lynn mentioned we have a whole slew of policies that we are studying and reviewing at home to be prepared to vote on next week. I'll ask if anyone has any specific questions on those policies for the board to discuss tonight or to get clarity on from the policy committee. There's a lot needed. Okay, not hearing any. Section 19, the curriculum and special ed approvals. A through M. Is there any discussion on those points that we'd like to have tonight for clarity?
We don't really have to discuss it, but there might be a typo on the date on the
Which one?
prenatal one, is that 19M?
The last one, Southern New Jersey.
Yeah, I might want to check that. It's not really, when you open it up. So, yeah.
Oh, we need the attachment.
Okay, check on that, Mike. Any others? Okay, personnel. We have A through F.
Well, the question will be, is this a retroactive extension that we're accepting? Because it says October 8th, or is he extending to November?
No, it's.
It's a retroactive extension.
That's correct.
Oh, fair enough.
So we have a retirement. I'll wait till next week to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's next week.
Okay. Not hearing any points to discuss on personnel. We'll look at finance, business and finance recommendations.
I just had a question for the $6,000 donation. Is that earmarked for something or is it?
The donor wanted to do something special for the teachers because of the challenges they're facing this time. So I've been talking to some people trying to get an idea of what that might look like.
Okay.
You know, it would normally be, let's have lunch, right? But you really can't, right? So all the things you usually would do that are very nice and great and distinctive and social. So we're trying to come up with some clever ideas for it, but that the intention is to do something for the teachers because of the efforts they put on. The family really appreciates it.
I have two questions then. The portrait of a graduate process, Adam, I believe you referred to it in a prior meeting, and I don't have a lot of details. I know Chuck is going to talk about it next meeting, but are you able to give just maybe like 3 to 5 sentences of what that entails, the whole process?
It looks very similar to developing a strategic plan, and that we'll get community members, we'll get teachers, board members, students, alumni, parents, community members. And what'll probably happen is you'll get 25 or so, and you'll break into different groups and have each group develop their own idea, come back together, develop a consensus. Once that's been done, we would put that out to community for feedback, take that community feedback and then revise again if needed. And then by the end of the process, have what we're calling a vision or portrait of our graduate.
And that would then shape our goals?
That will then give us it'll help shape goals, it'll help combine, get a common language of what we're doing. It'll help develop decision-making on curriculum pieces and type of instruction. So if our portrait of our graduate says we want people who are problem solvers, that would lead more to problem-based learning. It's an obvious example, but that's the type of piece we would look for. We also want to look at, the challenge is when you do this, to do this well, is the tendency would be that every community has the same vision of a graduate, right? But not every community. We're different than other communities. Every community is unique in its way. So to do this well, you really have to drive down to the uniqueness of a community and what is Haddonfield and why. And so that's part of the challenge. Is to do this well, you have to really drill down into what the community values in school. And I always joke that it's not being able to solve a quadratic equation. Some people, it will be solving a quadratic equation, right? That's really important. So that's why it is a long process, because that's why the groups will separate. So that way you're not having 20 people in a room deciding all at once. You want to come back, you want them to be different. And you come back and you draw that consensus down. So that's a basic overview of the process. And to me, for those, and it's a shame Mrs. McHale, if she's listening, I always go back that I don't go by dog, I go by Haddon, because that's what used to be the Haddons. This could be called a person really a Haddon. So Chuck's old school mascot of the Haddons.
We are going to come back with all kinds of different ideas, though, right?
We are going to come back.
Somehow, what are we going to do? We're going to say, okay, well, we're hearing this more than that. And so
then you
that's
just,
going to go.
why is this important? Why is that important? You draw that out to come to consensus on it. Yeah. It is a process. It's not just a vote. So,
How many board members are involved?
we haven't put the plan.
Oh, you haven't. Okay.
That'll all be next week. We'll I'll be laying out all the details.
I had a question concerning security cameras, and this is going vaguely back to when I think I first was on the board. And I remember there was an issue concerning you had to put up signage of some sort, like there was regulations around that. Okay, I'm only throwing it out there because
These cameras
one time we didn't realize the signage.
we put the cameras in, and we found there were places that needed cameras that were missed. So we went back to the principals and said, where can't you see? So an example is, I don't think any stairwells have cameras in them now. Stairwells are places probably should have cameras, right? Because that's where things can sometimes happen. So we now know where we need additional cameras, so we're filling in our missing spots right now.
Okay.
So I had a question about 21D. It is the annual maintenance budget amount worksheet. Like, I don't know if you noticed or not, the current area cost allowance per square foot, is that decided by, like, does the state give you that dollar? It's so little compared to what the state gives us when estimating things for a referendum. Like, there's a big disconnect between those.
Yeah, it's just a determined number from the state of New Jersey. I don't think it's changed in years.
Yeah, it's a shame. Okay. Thanks.
It's like the mileage rate.
Yeah. Actually,
Even that does change.
That was changed recently, but before that, I don't think it's been changed since the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Any others? Okay, any comments on the minutes? All right, any items for future consideration?
You already said you were talking about the land swap, right? That's my
Land swap next week. My homework. My homework is gonna be assigning it to Mike.
And do your ruler.
Yeah. And do rule. All right, any motion to adjourn?
Second.
Tom and Dave, thank you.
Tom's
Good night.
Good night, Susan.
Good night, Susan.
Good night, Colleen. Good night, Sandy. Good night, Carmen.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks for being
Good night.